Traveler, hurry, have a seat. I've heard something, if you have time to listen.
A demon once leaned over Kaighleigh as an infant and nearly made a meal of her. But the memory doesn't begin with teeth. It begins with a tiny hand, reaching up without fear and changing everything. Kaighleigh tugged once more on the teat of the bovine and then paused. Milk dripped in a final, slow rhythm, a soft patter against the surface below, and the bucket sat heavy and full between her knees. She stared down into it, as though the pale surface might settle the storm still lingering behind her eyes. The cow shifted faintly, a restless roll of muscle, and Kaighleigh lifted her hand to pat the animal's flank, gentle, steady, asking without words for calm. Dust floated in the barn's slanted light, disturbed by breath and movement. It settled slowly around them both, drifting like quiet ash. Kaighleigh blinked once, twice, gathering herself back into the present. The memory had been powerful, too powerful. Even now the echo of it clung to her skin, as if fear had hands and had left fingerprints along her ribs. She drew in a careful breath through her mouth, tasting hay and warm animal musk, and willed her thoughts to become small again. But certain truths did not shrink. That day, so long ago now, had been the first time she truly understood danger. Not as a story, not as a warning spoken by worried parents, but as something alive, something that could step out of darkness with teeth. It had also been the day she began to learn Wolfgar. Not all at once. Never all at once. Wolfgar gave pieces of himself the way a wary creature offers trust, slowly, reluctantly, only when he deemed it necessary. Over the 9 years since that incident, she had listened with the diligence of someone who understood that knowledge could mean survival. Bits and pieces, fragments, names and half-truths, silences that said more than words ever could. He had been something else once. A powerful, evil demon of sorts, so he said, and so she felt in the rough edges of his presence when his temper flared. Yet for all the darkness in him, there was one thing she had never doubted. He would never let her be harmed. The story of how he had first saved her had become an inner joke between them. Dark humor, the kind that only makes sense when you have lived too close to fear. He had found her as an infant for one reason, he claimed. To eat her. The thought should have been horrifying. It should have curdled her stomach. Instead, it made her smile faintly in the dim barn, the way someone smiles at a memory that has teeth but no longer bites. She had not remembered it on her own. How could she? But Wolfgar did. And at some point, he had allowed her into that memory. When she first accessed it, the vision had come so hard and so suddenly that the world around her blurred at the edges. Barn, straw, sunlight. Everything smudged and fell away until she was somewhere else entirely. She had looked down. An infant lay there, small, soft, impossibly delicate. It was her. The noise around them had been deafening, as if the world itself had been roaring. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was the black mass crouched in front of the child. All that mattered was the way the creature loomed, vast and deadly, and the way the infant wasn't afraid. In Wolfgar's memory, his heart had been a hard thing. Old, cruel, chipped down by centuries of hunger and violence. He had set her down with intent, red eyes fixed on soft pink flesh. And then the infant had reached up. Tiny fingers, a small hand. She had grabbed his nose, and she had smiled up at him as if he were something wonderful. In that moment, something in him broke, or softened, or woke. The ice chipped from his heart as he stared into her golden hazel eyes, bright as warm autumn, blinking up at him without fear. Her gaze held courage in it, a strange luster he had never found in any being since his own birth. Demon red met autumn gold, and he knew, without logic, without reason, that he had been set on this plane to protect her. not by command, by something older than command, by love so divine and irrational it frightened him more than any blade. When Kaighleigh had been released from the vision's grip, she had collapsed where she stood, as if her knees could no longer remember how to hold her. She had curled into herself and cried, huge, shaking tears that came from somewhere deeper than the body. The emotions had been too strong to contain. She had gasped for air, eyes stinging, and looked up. Up at him. At the black shape before her. Wolfgar. Once a demon. Now her eternal companion. Her protector, yes. But not only that. Her closest friend. Even when he was distant. Even when he vanished into the forest for long stretches, into whatever solitary hermit life he preferred. Even when his words were bitter or rude or gruff enough to scrape the skin off softer hearts. Kaighleigh listened to him anyway. No matter how cranky he became, his moods never truly dampened her spirit. If anything, she believed that difference was what made them work. Her vibrancy pressing against his shadow. Her laughter prying open doors he hadn't known were locked. Sometimes her words startled him so much that she would burst into peals of laughter until he either vanished in huffy silence or, rare and wonderful, he would bellow laughter back at her, deep and shaking, like thunder rolling through the roots of the world. He was a constant reminder of what she should love. Life, her parents, him, and the small, bright span of days they had been given. Kaighleigh's fingers tightened around the bucket's handle. She pushed herself up from the stool with a practiced lift, letting the bucket's weight settle into her arm. The milk sloshed softly, warm and full, and she turned away from the heifer with a slow, steady step. She moved toward the barn door, posture easy despite the weight, as though she had carried burdens like this all her life. At the threshold, she paused and leaned against the open frame, letting the air change on her face. Outside, sunlight spilled bright and clean across the yard. Inside, the barn breathed heat and dust. Above her, swallows darted through the rafters, chirping and chattering around their nests tucked into the beams. Light speared through pinholes in the roof, narrow rays falling all the way to the packed dirt floor, where hay lay stiffly over bedding and droppings. Kaighleigh breathed through her mouth to avoid the smell in the growing warmth. The day would get hotter, and the barn would only grow heavier with it. Her mind had wandered again. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, only long enough to feel the calm. Then she remembered the travelers. Her eyes opened. "How many are they?" she asked into the void of her mind, voice soft but alert. The bucket tilted slightly as her thoughts shifted, and she straightened quickly, rebalancing it against her leg. The barn's noise rose with her movement, cows shifting, hooves scraping, then settled again. 7 is their number. They are tracking a band of ogres that will pass you, but they will need food. Kaighleigh's jaw tightened. She adjusted her grip on the handle and stepped out into the glinting sunlight. A breeze met her immediately, cool and sharp against the heat of day. It slipped beneath the wool of her skirts and moved across her skin like clean water. She pressed her lips together, savoring the relief as she started along the cart path toward the back door of the cottage. "How many ogres?" she asked, even as she already feared the answer. She knew Wolfgar had limits, even if she didn't know what they were. He had turned aside many things over the years, creatures that wandered too close, shadows that should not have crossed into their peaceful bowl. Her parents left offerings once a month, a cow or lamb, believing him a forest spirit. Wolfgar insisted the offering wasn't needed, but he never refused a free meal. It kept him from hunting. It kept him near. 12. Kaighleigh scoffed softly, the sound half breath and half disbelief as she continued toward home. 12. A number that meant the wind itself was changing. Kaighleigh walked the familiar path back toward the house, the bucket steady in her hand, its warmth seeping through the iron and into her skin. The breeze followed her, tugging gently at her skirts, carrying with it the scents of earth and grass and sun-warmed wood. Home waited ahead, solid, quiet, unchanged. For now. She stepped through the back door and into the dim cool of the house. The light softened immediately, the sharp glare of day giving way to shadowed beams and worn floorboards. Her eyes adjusted without effort. She paused only long enough to set the bucket down with care. "Milk, Mother," she called. Footsteps answered her. Her mother appeared from around the corner, moving with that familiar to-and-fro rhythm born of years spent tending hearth and home. She took the bucket by its handle with a practiced heft, lifting its weight easily as though it were no burden at all. "Thank you, dear heart," she said, and reached up to touch Kaighleigh's cheek. The gesture was brief, warm, grounding. Kaighleigh felt it bloom inside her, comfort, safety, belonging. This was her mama. Round and sturdy, hair pinned back in a practical tumble, smelling faintly of bread and flour and warmth. From her apron, her mother produced a thick slice of bread and pressed it into Kaighleigh's hand. "You're getting too thin," she said gently. "Eat." Kaighleigh smiled. She was always too thin, according to her mother, no matter how her body had changed these past years, rounding and shaping into something no longer a child's. "Yes, Mama," she replied, obedient and fond. "Is Papa in the field?" she asked, as she followed her mother into the kitchen. Her mother nodded, already moving toward the churn. She set the bucket down, removed the lid, and poured the milk in with steady hands. The soft splash echoed quietly in the room. She fetched the long churning rod from its hooks and fitted it into place, fastening the lid before beginning the slow, rhythmic motion. Kaighleigh leaned against the doorway, chewing her bread. She was never very hungry in the mornings, but she ate anyway. It mattered to her mother. "Soon I'll send you with his lunch," her mother said. "North End today." Kaighleigh winced inwardly. The North End was the hardest soil, thick, rich, stubborn earth that took strength and patience to turn. Her father would be working the horses hard. She hesitated, then spoke, lowering her voice. "There are men headed this way," she said. "They are not in the nook yet, but they will be." Her mother's hands paused. She looked up, eyes sharpening as if she could see beyond the walls, beyond the valley itself. "They are expected tomorrow," Kaighleigh continued softly. "They will need food and supplies." Her mother nodded slowly, the churn resuming its steady rhythm. "As long as they pay," she said after a moment. "Your father is getting too old to fend off trouble without help." They both knew what lay unspoken between those words. Kaighleigh swallowed. "I am to be set in the cellar," she said. Her mother's mouth tightened, not in disagreement but in worry. This was how it had always been. Outsiders meant precautions, safety, silence. "Very well," her mother said at last. "I'll speak with your father tonight. Until then, tend the sheep. They need to be let out." Kaighleigh nodded. Respect came easily here. It was the air she had grown in. She turned toward the door, reached for the shepherd's crook hanging by the wall, and stepped back into the sunlight. Next time. The quiet work of the valley continues. A father turns the soil. Horses strain against the land. And Kaighleigh begins to understand that danger does not arrive all at once. Sometimes, it walks toward you slowly.
Wasn't that interesting? Now don't forget to subscribe for more.
And ring the bell for your server.